Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are early birds already on, thank you so much for joining us. If you could please type in the chat your name, your Ready Start network, and whether this is your first or second year as a participant in the Birth to Seat 3 Seats pilot, that would be wonderful. Again, thank you so much for your early attendance, and I'm so looking forward to the next hour with you all. Alrighty, everybody, for those of you who are just joining and looking at our slide on the screen, please, for those of you who haven't yet already, share with us your name, the network with whom you are present, and then the whether or not you are a first or second year participant, in the Birth to 3 Seats pilot. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. It's 2 o'clock right on the nose. We're going to give everybody just a couple more moments to start, and I will start at the stroke of 2:02. So thank you so much for your patience, for your timeliness, and we're going to get started in just 2 minutes. All right, everybody, it is 2:02 and I have a lot to get through today, so I want to make sure that I spend as much time as possible giving you all the information that I'm sure you're so excited to hear. But first, I want to shout out a couple of members from the LDOE team who are here with us today. We have Lizzie Kosei, who is my co-host this afternoon. And Lizzie, if you don't mind monitoring the chat box as well for me to make sure that I don't miss any really important pressing questions that would benefit the group. I will ask that everybody stays on mute until we see, I'd say, a slide that says discussion, or if I particularly ask somebody to come off mute because we have such a large group with us today and a lot to get through. I also want to shout out that we have our LDOE monitoring team here who has done a tremendous amount of work this year in reviewing our year 1 participants' eligibility practices and attendance tracking, and who have also really contributed deeply to the work that you're about to see today. And I'm so grateful to them for the input that they've had, and I think that all of you are going to deeply benefit from it for this year. And then also my other EC strategy team members, Taylor Dunn, Amy Poirier, Amanda Cullen, who are all here to be support systems for you all if you have questions that come up that are related to this work, but also potentially related to other work streams that they may see. And again, my name is Devin Camerata. For those of you who haven't gotten a chance to get to know me a little bit more deeply through the PDG Seats work or EC Guides work before, and I actually just had my 1-year anniversary with the department last week. And I'm so excited to be managing this work and be continuing to develop relationships with my first year cohort and also get to know my teammates for the upcoming year as well. And lastly, you probably heard me just now giggle a little bit when I said PDG seats, because as you will see throughout these slides, we are kind of stepping away from the PDG seat phrasing of this work and calling it B-3 seats. So if you guys have patience with me as I work to make sure that I change my habits and you as well do so, because as you're going to see, this work is no longer just funded by PDG seats. So we made some adjustments to the name and to the language so that we can be more inclusive of our funding streams and also make sure that this is able to translate year after year, no matter where our funding is coming from and no matter how many children we're serving. So that being said, we're going to jump into our webinar today. Okay, here we go. So today, as I mentioned, today is the kickoff webinar. We're going to talk about several different topics with some minute components, the overview of our awards and their seats, our guidance for the 2021-2022 year, our planning for 2021 and 22, and some best practices with some cameos from your first year participants, and then some next steps. A timeline to set you guys in the framework of what this next couple of months will look like. Today, as I mentioned, is our first kickoff webinar. On June 1st, we are going to take a really deep dive into eligibility. We're going to briefly talk about it today, but we're going to spend an entire hour discussing it on June 1st. So if you do have any questions specific to eligibility today, either hold on tight to them and email them to me afterwards, or wait patiently until that June 1st date. Because we're going to give you all of the information you need then. June 14th is when your planning document is due, and it's emailed to my email, devin.camerata@la.gov. And that will be sent out to you in a Word document at the end of this webinar. July 1st is when your funds will be live in EGMS. They'll complete assurances, contact information, and you can submit your budget as early as July 1st after you do those first two things. July 15th, we'll have another webinar to discuss mainly EGMS and payments, but also to review eligibility for any of you who have staff members who are not able to participate in June 1, or if you just want another refresher on those really complicated processes. And lastly, your budget will be due July 31st in EGMS. So make sure, I'm going to send all of these slides out to you at the end of this webinar, but make sure that these important dates are locked into your calendar so that you're able to stay on track with making sure that your centers and your network are set up for success with implementing these seats. So today we're really so grateful to all of you and all of the other networks who couldn't be here with us today for your robust super app requests. We emphasize so many times to you to ask for as many as you possibly could. And over the state, we had 4,641 additional birth to 3-year-old seats requested. And of the 65 early childhood community networks, 52 of them, which is 80%, requested seats, which is an increase from last year. And that is a huge, robust request that we're so grateful for. And unfortunately, we can't fund every single seat yet. But through CRSA and PDG renewal funding, we were able to fund all Ready Start Network requests in diverse delivery for a total of 2,970 seats. And I just want you all to take a minute to think about the dramatic increase from 2 years ago where we had this pilot didn't exist to last year, where as you can see in this slide, we only had 13 networks participating, 672 children as of April 2021 attendance. Thank you all for the year 1 participants for submitting your attendance on time, to 2,970 seats in 22 Ready Start networks, with an additional 35 this year being placed in family childcare through Volunteers of America, and they're growing from their 18 seats allocation, from year 1. So that dramatic increase in seats is one of the main reasons why we are taking our time this summer to really dig deep into our requirements, our guidelines, our eligibility determination, and also why it's going to be super important for everybody participating this year to be really meticulous in making sure that you are setting yourself up for success from the start of your planning document through all of the measures that you create for yourselves, because this is a huge number of seats. And we want you to feel as successful as possible as you're implementing those seats. So as I mentioned, there's a split between the funding and just, this is a little high level stuff, so I'm going to go over it a little bit quickly, but if you're curious and want to know more, you can ask me about this through email or save some time at the end for questions. But 22% of your funding allocation, will be funded through PDG renewal, and 78% is funded through CRSA, the stimulus funding. And all of your CRSA funding is available July 1. And for those of you from last year, you may remember that there was a little bit of a delay in some funds being transitioned during that December to January time, because the preschool development grant is awarded on a calendar year rather than a fiscal year. We've set it up so that 45% of your PDG portion is held back and reallocated to you in December, so that we don't have to worry about kind of some of those just technical complications that we had to do last year. So just so that you know, this is why your allocation in July is going to look different from your award notice in that you received on April 23rd. And That being said, also, if there are any networks who have over enrollment or waiting lists at any point in the year, that's part of the reason why we do attendance tracking, which I'm going to get into a little bit later, so that we can make every possible attempt to fund seats with additional dollars in December, and then make reallocation considerations just generally across the board of our participants. As I mentioned, all of your funding for July is 55% of your PDG portion, 100% of your cursive portion, and an additional 45% of your PDG portion will be allocated to you in December. And if you have any questions or concerns about what your total allocation is, just look back at that April 23rd notification, which you will need for your planning document, because your planning document should budget for your entire allocation. We also want to encourage you to draw down your PDG renewal dollars first this fall before tapping into cursive funding, to again just make it easier with all of the EGMS nuances, so that you don't have to necessarily worry about rollover. You don't need to worry about anything else other than just spending your money, using it urgently, etc. And I see that Lizzie just added into the chat box to encourage us to spend that PDG renewal dollars this fall to make everything easier for you in EGMS. Thanks for that input, Lizzie. Oops. All righty. So now we're going to get into some of the more important stuff as far as implementing these seats, our guidance for the 2021-22 year. Now, for those of you, again, I'm going to say this a bunch of times, and not to differentiate y'all in any way, shape, or form from new and returning, but because this is going to be new information for everybody, I want everybody who's listening to make sure you're paying close attention, because there are definitely changes that are happening from year 1 to year 2. And I want to make sure that we're all really, really clear as we move forward. So everybody pay close attention. Our requirements for the Birth to 3 pilot are here in regards to center partnerships, payment modeling, eligibility determination, and attendance tracking. And we set these requirements up to ensure that these are sustainable programs, or so that this pilot is sustainable, so that you are set up for success in making sure that the quality of care is extraordinary for your children in your network, and also so that you're setting your centers up for success and being able to sustain themselves year after year. This is both for the children and for the centers to be fiscally sound, and to make the childcare profession as strong as it possibly can be. And it starts with you guys creating these planning documents. So as I've mentioned already, and I'm going to say it hopefully 1,000 times before the end of this webinar, that document is due to me in my email by June 14th. And in that document, you will establish partnership agreements with your centers that meet the department criteria, determine eligibility for participating families. Excuse me, I think I misspoke just now. I said in your planning document. That's not true. You will submit a planning document and establish partnership agreements and determine eligibility for all participating families, enroll children, and retain documentation for auditing purposes. You will create your budget for the Birth to 3 seats pilot funding. You will determine payment structure to centers for the children enrolled, and you will track attendance and submit to the department monthly. Those are the main bottom line must happen requirements for this pilot. And our additional recommendations for this year that are not mandatory, but we strongly, strongly urge you to adhere to these as we saw them as best practices in year 1, to structure your payments at the beginning of the month to centers, to ensure flexibility in your partnership agreements for seat allocations, and add language for termination of partnership as needed, and to hire or delegate staff for the exclusive purpose of administering Birth to 3 seats. And this will be all the more important, as I mentioned earlier, because of the jump in number of seats. It is going to be crucial that you have teammates who are solely focused on administering these seats, so that you can be set up for success when monitoring, when audits, when any accountability measures come into play. So now we're going to talk specifically about which centers with whom you may partner. These are bottom line must-haves, and you as the network can make your participation requirements more rigorous. You can set up structures to make sure that you are establishing a fair process with the choosing partnerships, such as an application process like Jefferson had last year, such as interviews with directors, or adding different requirements like professional development participation, like CCR&R recommendations for those centers. But the main things are to have a 2020-2021 performance rating of proficient or above. If a Ready Start network, is interested in partnering with a new Type 3 center that is not yet rated, please let us know and we will work with you and that center in making sure that they're able to participate while still meeting these high expectations. They must also have infant spots available or plan to have infant spots available in fall 2021. You can use your birth to 3 seat or funding to create those infant spots. They also may not need, let me rephrase, they do not need to have infant spots that are funded by birth to 3, but every single center that you partner with must be capable of serving infants, whether or not those are the seats that you place there. Ensure that these seats are full-time, 6 hours of continuous care minimum, and teachers must meet the ECAC requirement or be on the path to their ECAC certification. Again, as I mentioned, June 1st, we are going to take a very deep dive into eligibility determination for families. But for you to be set up for success for your partner or for your planning document, you need to know these main qualifications. For families to be eligible for the birth to 3 seats pilot, they need to be at or below the 200% federal poverty level. They need to show that they are needing care, which means that they are a parent or a guardian of a child working at least 20 hours a week, or in training at least 20 hours a week, or in school full-time, or actively seeking employment. Now, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, the people caring for the child, can be a combination of those things. They can be working 10 hours a week. They can be in school the other 10 or some greater comparison, but it needs to be some combination of those. There are categorically eligible children who should be enrolled immediately, and those are children experiencing homelessness and children in foster care. Again, we're going to go over all of the eligibility determination, what those documents look like, how you should handle them, what the deadlines are, et cetera, on June 1. But for your success with the planning document, this is all you need at this time. Another really big component of the planning document is to understand what you are going to pay your centers per children. Now, our allocations that we set up, as you saw in the award notification on April 23rd, is that we have set up a recommended or an estimated yearly amount to pay centers per child. Based on the zone, rural or urban, which you're in, you can see your center or your network, on the left. And you can see also that the differences between zone 1 and zone 2 are not all that much. Really, the only difference is for toddlers in zone 1 and zone 2. This also does not mean that you need to pay exactly this much per child. You can pay your centers a variant of these funds per age group, but you must make sure that families do not pay tuition for these children. They must be free to families. So that is your bare minimum. And again, we base these rates on the market rate survey and CCAP rates, and adding the school readiness tax credit bonus. As I mentioned, also attendance tracking is a big component, and it is so helpful in us seeing the successes, the wins, the struggles of us over the year participating in this. And it is critical in us creating a database of data to show why birth to 3 seats are so critical for our state. So signed attendance trackers are due on the 10th day of the following month in alignment with LA4 tracking. They only need to capture present or absent and not necessarily take into account excused absences. Though if you as the network want to track that information, you may. The department is not necessarily interested in it. You should only track the child's first initial of first name and first 2 letters of the last name to protect the child's privacy. I'm including that here. It seems like a really small component, but I want to make sure that we are adhering to privacy regulations from the start. And then we will share your Google Sheets with your attendance trackers in July after you have submitted the partnerships, or excuse me, the centers with whom you will partner, so we can add those centers into your planning documents. For those of you who have participated in LA4, it looks really similar to that structure, and it's probably one of the simplest parts of this work. So just look forward to getting those in your inbox soon.
Hey, Devin, can we go
So now
back
we're going
to
to dig a little
slide?
bit deeper into planning. Again, I'm going back to that super important planning document due on June 14th. I think I'm at maybe 7 times saying that today in this webinar. And like I said, I'm trying to get to 100. But these planning documents will include centers with whom you will partner and the rationale for your partnership, the approximate allocation of seats and age group by site. And again, I'm emphasizing approximate because you never know if a family is going to have a sibling or a series of siblings that you weren't accounting for and you want to keep them all at the center. This is not set in stone, but it is what you're estimating to do. The partnership agreement draft, that you're going to see that example in the planning document, but we want you to actually physically go in and edit and make it as close to final as possible so that we can provide you feedback on it. You will also complete your budget draft and then answer responses, answer planning questions such as recruitment strategies, that important cost of care per age, and internal business office planning. These are the really critical components of that planning document.
Hey, Devin.
Here are some examples of questions that you'll see. We're not going to talk about all of them right now, but I am going to read them out and give you guys just a second to pause and think about some of your answers to these questions, such as, what are the most important components of your partnership agreements? We may interchange the words assurances or MOUs, or your business office might call them one of the 3. I'm going to continue to say partnership agreements just because that's the language we're using. How will you ensure that each center meets those requirements, and what additional activities will you implement specifically for sites receiving those B-3 seats? And how much does your network plan to pay centers per seat for each age range, and how did you establish this rate? So again, I'm not going to read through all of these questions, but I want to take a second for you all to pause and think about each of these, because you're going to have to answer all of them quite soon. And I see that the chat box has some activity, so I'm going to take a second to pause and review. Alrighty, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And now we're going to turn it over to our friends at St. Mary Community Action Coalition. And they had an extraordinary year with their center, Miss Pam's Personal Touch. And they have some best practices to share with you about selecting centers with whom to partner. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharnique, and we will, Sharnique, if you don't mind sharing with us for about 2 to 3 minutes your best practices.
Okay, thank you, Devin. Hi, everyone. It's good to see everybody. Hi, Lizzie. Thank you so much for once again giving St. Mary Parish this opportunity to speak on behalf of our Birth to 3 seats. This year that we had in regards with COVID, it's definitely been one for the books, but we were so thankful for the seats that we were awarded due to the changes that were happening in early childhood for this past year with the pandemic. So I'll get straight into like our best practices that we had in regards to working with Ms. Pam at Pam's Personal Touch. First of all, Ms. Pam has been a part of our network for quite a while. So since the very beginning, she's been one of the monumental leaders in our network as far as early childhood. She goes above and beyond, and she really has taken the seats that she has been given and ran with them. We were awarded about, I believe, 28 seats, but Ms. Pam has taken on 24 of those 28 seats. So aside from those 24 seats, she only has about 5 children at her facility that are paying children. So that was a good way for us to figure out what would be the best way that we can approach these seats with Ms. Pam, because she was so dedicated to always maintaining fidelity and high quality care for her childcare staff and her children. So it was just a no-brainer for us to speak with her, and she gladly took the seats and took on the challenge. We stayed very active in communication as far as me personally, because I am the person that facilitates for the birth to 3 seats with Ms. Pam. I would speak to her often. I speak to Ms. Pam frequently. Talking with her, we speak with her for network meetings that we have, our reoccurring network meetings that we have on a monthly basis. I go by Ms. Pam's facility. I couldn't do it initially at first because COVID was was definitely starting out. So we had to find another way that we could speak to one another. So whether it was through telephone or email or even texting Ms. Pam, I always just tried to make sure that I kept all lines of communication with her, especially because it was a pilot program and it was so new that I just wanted her to feel comfortable. Everyone at the agency, our network, wanted to make sure that Ms. Pam understood what was going on with the seats, and just wanted her to feel comfortable at all aspects. Any questions that she has, even still, I just talked to Ms. Pam like 2 times today. So before we got on here. So I'm just happy to have her as a network partner. As far as like providing additional business support with her, advertising that we would do, professional development, like within the network, we already do trainings, and just trying to find creative ways that we can reach out to our network partners to ensure that they are meeting access and producing high quality for their teaching staff and children. So for example, over this past year, we did a commercial for St. Mary Parish Ready Start Network. And Ms. Pam was one of our shining stars in our commercial. So her and her husband, Mr. Jones, they participated in the commercial that we had, and she had a specific section that highlighted on what the preschool development grant was, advertising her business as far as telling them how they could qualify for it, giving them some insight and information about that. And Ms. Pam has an extremely lengthy waiting list. I think that the commercial also helped play a part in that, but just by verbally having communication throughout the network and even throughout our St. Mary Parish community, because Ms. Pam is a leader not only in early childhood in St. Mary Parish, but she's also a leader in our parish as well, just in general for being the kind of bright personality that she has. So community outreach was something that definitely played a factor in that. So I would recommend that hitting the ground running, finding some new and creative strategies to cater to those low income areas, or just those low areas that may need childcare assistance, and then just show and highlight the benefits of preschool development grant or birth to 3 seats, because the parents don't have to pay for these seats that they're being issued to. So that's another less of a stress on them. You know, sometimes transportation is hard to come by. People have to pay bills, you know, go to work and deal with their children and have to work with their kids. So that's another just good way to highlight that, hey, you know, this is something that would benefit you and your child by being able to come to a facility, still maintain a high quality access to education, but having just that stress of not having to pay for childcare assistance. It's just a beautiful thing. And like I said, we had weekly attendance reports with Ms. Pam. And like I said, I just stayed consistent with speaking with her. She's very, very punctual. One thing that we like here at St. Mary Parish is that we try with these seats, especially with the preschool development grant, being that it was such a large quantity of funding, we wanted to make sure that we were handling our attendance with fidelity. So Ms. Pam was very good about giving me her attendance on time for me to input it and log it into the Google Forms. And then any questions that she would have about anything or anything that I would have with her, she immediately sends it to me. So we make sure that being that we're having that effective communication, we're able to stay in contact with each other. And it's just been a wonderful experience. And I look forward to our allocation to come for this next school year.
Sharnique, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you all for your patience with two things. One, the alarm that just went off at the department building. And Sharnique, I'm so sorry that happened and you just kept rolling through, and I so appreciate you. You're excellent. And also, fun technology adventures. I couldn't hear Lizzie for the first couple of moments. So if you heard her calling out to me, I love Lizzie and I was not ignoring her. I just had my headphones still plugged in. So thank you all for your patience. And thank you, Sharnique, for your example. And thank you, Ms. Pam, for being such an extraordinary leader in your community and for being a great example of what an extraordinary partner in this work looks like.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. So as Sharnique discussed, there is, and as I've mentioned a few times in this webinar so far, there are partnership agreements that you will establish with your participating centers, and you're going to send us as close to final draft as possible in your planning document. Two of the main components that we want to encourage you to include are making sure that you are not setting yourself in stone with the number of seats that you administer to a center. We would encourage you to put a range saying approximately 10 to 15 seats, so that if, for example, a parent at another site has 3 children and you will have another seat at one center, you are able to establish that flexibility within your network of where these seats will be placed. And as you can see here, there are some other components that we encourage you to think about, such as attending recurring meetings on a daily or weekly, monthly basis via Zoom or in person, to discuss those things that Sharnique was telling us about earlier or just a few minutes ago, or to participate in a specific professional development series, maybe through your CCR&R or through another pilot, or excuse me, through another program that you are really, really excited to hear about, et cetera. And then in this next section, you'll see some other components of the partnership agreement that you may want to include. And I want to then highlight here that the Ready Start Network, or that we encourage you to include, the Ready Start Network has the right to remove children and funding from a particular center at any point during the year, if the center is out of compliance with the listed agreements or in violation of anything within Bulletin 137. Again, because you just want to make sure that you are protecting yourself, protecting your center, and most importantly, protecting the children that are participating.
Hey, Devin, can I jump in real quick?
Yes, ma'am, Lizzie, and I can hear you this time.
Glad, thanks. Sorry, everybody, about that. I also want to point out this first line, and I want to let you guys know we are sharing this partnership sample with you. So feel free to take it, edit it, make it your own, whatever makes the most sense for your network, because every single network that is receiving birth to 3 seats is slightly different. Some of you just have 1 child care center. Some of you will have to do this with a dozen child care centers or more. So we definitely just want to make sure it's tailored to what your needs are. I do want to point out this first line, receive blank dollar amount, because like Devin said earlier, the state set rates, and when we allocated you those funds, we gave you an average of those rates based on what zone you were in. But you in turn are the ones who decide how much you pay your centers per seat. So that is a decision that's up to you. So that means, you're going to have to think about what are your greatest needs. And I know we're going to cover budget in a little bit, but I wanted to put that on your radar early on and just re-emphasize that decision is up to you. You will submit that in your planning document. So we'll be looking to make sure, obviously we want these rates to still be really attractive and wonderful and helpful to those centers that receive them. But you also need to consider what your own administrative needs are and how much that's going to cost, and therefore use that to determine these rates. So I'm going to put myself back on mute. Just wanted to jump in there real quick. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. So the next thing that we're going to do is hear another best practice from our friend Michelle Jubert in Calcasieu Parish. And because Calcasieu just experienced the gambit of all things wackadoodle in this past year, and because Michelle set herself up for success with her really strong partnership agreements, she was able to make decisions throughout the year that still kept her centers open, that still kept children in care, whether they were at home with their families in times of quarantine or whether they were at a different center because the one that they originally tried to sign up for was in recovery from Hurricane Laura. She made sure that she set herself up for success. And Michelle, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it over to you for just a few minutes to discuss how you were able to do this with your seat placement, with your partnership agreements, and how you succeeded in year one.
Well, thank you, Miss Devin. So happy to be on the call today. We did Head Start interviews this morning, so we have our first set of kids and a few PDG as well. Woohoo! So we're excited. I guess to say some of the best practices that we've implemented here in Calcasieu with our birth to 3 seats for the first year was developing an MOU with everyone coming together to develop the MOU. So myself, as well as the child care directors, assistant directors, we came together in partnership to really state what were our things that were non-negotiable and what were our things, what were things that we were willing to be flexible on. And so I think for us, us having a clear understanding of what our vision was for our first year with birth to 3 seats, please know it definitely changed as we experienced 2 hurricanes in our area. But I have to say, overall, the vision of what we wanted in our child care centers and the support that they expected from the community network, it was definitely that part was easy for us to continue those practices and continue to support the centers as they were able to get through the first year. I think one of the big things in our partnership as we developed the MOU, I think it was everyone coming to the table to ensure that it wasn't someone that we were just putting in their center and telling them, hey, this is your employee. The child care directors were able to interview teachers who were either displaced or new to the profession. And so they were able to select the employees that they have in their centers for this school year. And that was a big takeaway, a big win for me, because I feel like the child cares, they really felt like they had a voice. The directors felt like they had a voice in really deciding who was coming in to support the students and the families in their center. And even now, as we move on to year 2, we're having meetings to discuss what were our things that we saw that we could do different, what were our successes. And one of the things that has been very clearly articulated was the staff that they received. They are all very appreciative of the individuals that they have and want to continue to have them for this upcoming year. So that part is really exciting for them to want to stay on as partners with us, but also keep the same employees. And for me, it's a positive because just having that consistency when it comes to attendance tracking and all those things where those individuals will know what it looks like, that part is going to be nice for us. I think the other wins that we saw this year was collaborative partnerships and meetings bi-monthly with the centers, whether it be the teachers, they do coaching sessions with one of our coaches here. She meets with them probably more than bi-monthly, I would say every 3 weeks, just because it's a little different because they really are CPSB employees. And even though the director is not, we wanted to ensure that they felt supported. So when it came to SLTs, when it came to other requirements that we have here in the school district, those people are, the staff is still accountable. So we wanted to make sure they felt like they had someone that they could go to. And so the coach meets with the teachers or the co-teachers every 3 weeks. But for our directors, we meet bi-monthly and just talk about any big takeaways, anything that they're needing support with. And the coach goes there in person. They do we do virtual PLCs with the child carers, but then the coach typically visits every 3 weeks as well. And she's in the centers working with them, supporting them with assessments and TS goal and those types of things. So that part has been nice. And I will say one of the big takeaways for my child carers, Ms. Stephanie at Ships Ahoy reported, Dr. Jubert, my TS goal is so much better now that I have these CPSB teachers, because even though I was explaining as the director to my teachers what TS goal was to look like, I think because these are teachers supporting each other, other teachers with it, the workers are working together to ensure that TS goal is done with fidelity. And so that's been a big piece in Calcasieu and some of our centers. And then lastly was the coaching sessions with our classroom teachers and the directors. I think that piece has been very instrumental, because once again, like I said, it's just equity of voice. No one is right or wrong. Everyone is coming to the table to see what it looks like. And like I said, for us in CPSB, it's different because this is our first diverse delivery practice that we've ever implemented. And so for us, it's not necessarily been difficult, but it's definitely been a challenge because we're so used to our teachers being in a school where it's like, oh, the principal will tell you that. And it's like, oh, we don't have a principal at that site. So it's our responsibility. But I think overall the teachers feel very much supported, and because they have a coach that they can contact, or myself, but typically it's the coach that they contact that supports them very often in ensuring that they are implementing the same practices that we have in our CPSB classrooms. So that's it. I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, so much for sharing your practices. And as Lizzie mentioned just now in the chat box, using your school board or school parish teachers is not a requirement, but it is an option. And I'm sure that Michelle would be more than happy to talk with you about how she set that up if you're interested in moving forward with a structure like that. So the next piece is enrollment and finding these children and getting them into the seats. So as you know, you as the Ready Start Network are responsible for enrolling all of your children, and your planning documents and all enrollment planning beyond that should include staff who are designated to lead enrollment, budgeting for enrollment activities, such as the commercial that Sharnique explained in her best practices. And Sharnique, please share that link with us if you have it. We would love to see that. Any event plans, whether they're going to be in person or virtual, community locations to advertise, radio or TV advertisements, and then also thinking about the demographics or neighborhoods that you are going to increase your extended outreach to, and how you can really utilize this work or this funding to serve families who are the most disadvantaged in your communities, who most need this help. And again, more enrollment topics will be discussed at June 1. But again, you're going to need to start thinking about this now so that you can be ready with that planning document. So, excuse me, my mouse jumped around. So I want to take a second. We're running a little bit short on time, so I'm not going to ask you all to come off of mute, but I am going to ask you to start thinking about these questions. What enrollment practices already exist in your network and what improvements can be made? What feedback have you received in the past to improve your enrollment practices? How are you reaching out to your economically disadvantaged families? Do you have team members who will be dedicated to just birth to 3 seats enrollment? And what are your current documentation collection procedures? As I mentioned, you are responsible for collecting all of the documents and retaining them so that you can prove your family's eligibility determination processes. And that's something that you're going to need to deeply understand. So I'm going to give you guys just 15 seconds to process these questions before I move on to the next slide. Alrighty. So now we're going to hear from Ms. Leslie Hodges in Washington Parish, who since the jump of this pilot last year was fully enrolled, and even through COVID-19, she had a wait list in January and received additional funding because of some of the extraordinary measures she took in order to enroll children. So Leslie, if you don't mind popping off of mute and just sharing with us for a few quick minutes, since we are running close to the end of time, I'm so sorry, to share the best practices that you took to enroll children.
Hi. Yes, we really got out into the community. We didn't actually need to have a TV advertisement. It was word of mouth and going in person to grocery stores, the post office, the parks, the pediatricians' offices, and making sure that they were aware that these seats that were available in the community, and we encouraged families that we thought would be eligible to go ahead and apply. We also worked with our center directors they're the ones on the cutting edge. They know the families that are on wait lists and the families that are in need of support, folks who've just lost their job, and are really struggling. And so, we worked with them to train them in the eligibility requirements as we, in the best way that we could. So they were actually, out front collecting the applications, collecting the documentation that was needed, and then they would come and meet with us, and we would review it, and we would talk with the families and see what was needed to see if they would be eligible for the seats, and if they were not eligible for the seats, they were supported in applying for CCAP. So, but the need was there, and it was almost as if once the word was out in the community, but we did put some little blurbs in our advertising too about possible scholarships available in the child care, we refer to them as birth to 3 scholarships. So that sort of got parents interested enough to call and get more information. So we've had a waiting list for seats. We've never had a seat that didn't go unfilled for any longer than a week or two, because there was always someone qualified, ready to step into that spot and fill that seat. So.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing.
You're welcome, Devin.
Alrighty, so we're gonna keep rolling on and talk more about the allowable uses of these funds. So this list, again, because this is a pilot, this is not an exhaustive list. These are the main things that we saw the funds used for last year. These are the best practices we saw the funds used for last year, but you are all innovating each year, each day, and thinking of creative ways to use these funds. So if you do, in your budget, you're going to be sharing with us what you're intending to use these funds for. And if there is something that either raises a question mark for us at the department or raises a question mark for you, that's part of the reason why we have the planning document, to discuss, to work together, to find solutions, to find creative ways to problem solve. So the allowable uses of funds include salary for administrative staff, professional development for teachers and directors, Tier 1 curriculum, materials for classrooms, stipends and salaries for teachers, enrollment activities, translators for non-English speaking, families to enroll, and coaching staff salary who are supporting those birth to 3 centers. And as you can see, I've bolded the salary for administrative staff because we are about to hear from another teammate, our last best practice of the afternoon, Miss Theresa Lawson from Children's Coalition, who was the designated birth to 3 seats person for Children's Coalition. And because of her position, Children's Coalition had one of the strongest monitoring results after our team reviewed their eligibility requirements, because she was so intimately aware of every single component of it. And so I want to pass the mic to Theresa today to just talk about how that benefited Children's Coalition and the pilot program in Monroe and Richland, in Morehouse and Richland, so that they were able to reach that much success. Theresa, you have the floor for just a couple of moments while we're closing out the session.
All right, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. And first off, I will say that just being organized, like finding my way to be organized, and knowing my directors has been so pivotal in this year, as it's been a learning year for all of us. It's been a learning year for me because this has been my first time doing this type of position. So in order to get all of those documents, I had to ask my teammates here at the Children's Coalition, for some advice if there was any questions about things, or as you know, Devin, I've had to ask you some questions too, just to clarify things. But going back with that team of the Children's Coalition and with those directors, they know the families that we were trying to enroll, and they knew which were better ways to collect these documents, whether it be sending it to me through an email or collecting it at the sites. And then whenever COVID had let up a little bit, I was able to actually pick up some of those documents at the sites rather than always having to rely on something getting electronically sent. But just kind of like ditto or piggybacking on, I think what Leslie said, talking with the directors about, what documents to look through also helped. And it helped clarify any questions that the parents might have, because again, whenever I call some of the parents, they might be like, who is this person from the Children's Coalition? I thought I was talking to so-and-so at this center. They have those relationships with those families, so they were able to help. When the directors understood, they were able to help with the collection of those documents. And then again, organization with me, I always say, and I just told the directors, I think last month, that like I'm constantly trying to find that way that I can better be organized. I chose to make sure that I have, not only electronic copies, but physical copies of these applications, because I like having that physical copy to actually see those documents. But my biggest thing that I learned with those physical copies is I'm not a fan of paper clips. They fly all over the place. And yeah, so that's a side little note. But yeah, and my team, again, with the directors and my team here at the Children's Coalition, have helped me, learn new ways to be organized, or just be that other set of eyes, especially during our monitoring review. Again, since this was my first time, doing this, I got to talk to people that have gone through a monitoring review before, so I kind of knew, things to expect or timelines, just to ease my anxieties a little bit. But they were very pivotal in helping with that, but not only having another set of eyes just to verify that everything was put in that order. I love that checklist or I kind of view it as a checklist of having everything in that particular order, because then it helped us know that we had what y'all asked for.
Thanks so much, Theresa.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and we are going to move on for our final slides of the afternoon, but Theresa mentioned, and I want to encourage every single person to do this at any point. If you have any questions at any time for eligibility, for best practices, please reach out to me and also reach out to each other and utilize this cohort of people for clarifying questions to make sure that you're on the right track of things. There is no question that's too small. This is a pilot. We are all learning, and it is super important that we make sure that we are collaborating as much as possible. So again, I'm going to kind of skim through these questions. These are ones that you're going to see in your planning document, thinking about the big picture problems within your network that you might be able to address through birth to 3 seats activities and funds. How can you increase family engagement strategies with birth to 3 seats funding? And how will you leverage these seats to help stabilize childcare? As I mentioned at the top of this webinar, the mission of this pilot, the heart of why this exists, is for 2 reasons. One, because we know that children aged birth to 3 are the most underserved in our state, as well as the profession of childcare needs stabilization, and it needs excellent, brilliant people like you to infuse it with the energy and the planning that will make it the strong profession that we know it is, and that the potential that it can be with just a little extra support. The next thing that is super important, and this is a new part of the planning document for this upcoming year. I'm not going to read through each question, but I want you to know that in your planning document, you are going to be asked to answer some questions about working with your business office, because we did notice this past year that there were many circumstances regarding reimbursements, regarding payment structures that were new to all of you, and you needed to have a really intimate relationship with your business office in order to make those payments to your centers. So just know that you're going to be needing to ask these questions, or ask yourself these questions, answer them, and do a little bit of collaboration internally. So the structure, the timeline for EGMS and reimbursements, we have a recommended payment model set up for you for the whole year. Right now, you're just looking at a snapshot that takes you to December, but this is the department's recommended schedule for setting up payments, for making sure that you are on track with the different events that are happening, and so that you can just stay on track. This isn't a mandatory timeline, but it's one that we recommend you sticking to. Now, there's a couple of just quick things that I want to address. Reimbursements. Documentation for reimbursements is optional. And this is new information that I just learned, so we're all learning it together. You just need to submit your budget code, the dates of the reimbursement period, and the description of the expenses are the only things that are required. Now, you can submit documentation, and it makes things a lot easier for you down the line when you're submitting your quarterly PER, where documentation is required. However, you do not need it for reimbursements on the department's end. So that means you can start submitting reimbursements as early as you have your budget approved. And then more information on attendance and enrollment requirements for reimbursements will be shared in the coming weeks. But we just want to make sure that you have this information as you're thinking about going into your planning document. Really quickly, we're going to talk about this more on June 1st, but you will also, for those of you who just who are year one participants, you're going to have to redetermine eligibility for some of your families who were birth, toddler, and even 3-year-olds going into LA4 potentially. So you will notify families of the eligibility documents needed, notify them of a deadline, verify those eligibility documents, and place or return children in seats. But again, they will have to go through their application process 1 year after their application date. We'll talk about this more again on June 1st. All right, and timing is on our side today. So next steps, you'll complete your planning document by June 14th. You've already heard many times the requirements for that. You're going to review the resources that I send out after this webinar. Those are the slide deck that you've seen today, the partnership agreement, and a document that is titled the 2021-2022 guidelines for birth to 3 seats. And that talks about every component of birth to 3 seats in detail, including eligibility. So you might be a little overwhelmed at first. It's several pages long. Take your time, dig through that, use it as a source. Like, think about it as your summer reading going into your first day of classes, which will be June 1st at that eligibility training, which is, again, June 1st, eligibility. That's after that long weekend from Memorial Day. Make sure that you have a representative there with us if you are out of town. And then also prepare any onboarding for administrative staff who might be supporting you if they are not the lead agency contact. If there's somebody else on your staff, we highly recommend that they attend that webinar as well. And the planning document in a Word form will be sent as well. So we encourage you to save and review these documents in preparation for June 1, and we will take a deep dive into those eligibility determination on that day. We have just 2 minutes left before you go over to the weekly webinar for lead agencies, but I want to thank all of you for your participation. I will stay on for the remaining 2 minutes, and if there are any lingering questions, please email them to me since we don't have time to go into a deep discussion. And I'm just so grateful for all of you. Thank you to my LDOE teammates who are here today. And thank you for all of you and your future centers, your future families, and future children that you'll be serving with this work. We will see you in just a minute at the weekly webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Devin.